Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. Daniel Charles here. It is Thursday, another day closer to Chelsea's judgment day of their Premier League season against Nottingham Forest. Whether Champions League football will be at Stamford Bridge next season will be defined and will be clarified on Sunday. I have to say the nerves are starting now, especially post the Europa League final, which I'm sure all of you watched, and it was probably the worst result. Listen, neither team are ones that Chelsea wanted to win. But as a Chelsea fan, even if they're not my most hated team, I can't quite believe there were Chelsea fans okay with Spurs winning yesterday. So yeah, listen, Spurs have won. I hope they do what they usually do and they won't take advantage of the investment they now have because of Champions League football. But the thought of Chelsea ending the season where 17th place gets Champions League and we don't, is a nightmare. So hopefully Chelsea can not only achieve Champions League football, but also in Roclaw next week, where I will be, Chelsea can lift the trophy as well and end the season on a high. So we have got some big results and games coming up for Chelsea that will be defining on how we judge this season. I mean, I only got to watch the second half live. The quality of football was bad, and I know that people are kind of over-egging it because it's 16th against 17th. I have to say, just based on watching the second half, and the first half may have been worse, it didn't feel that dissimilar to a lot of finals I watch. I think a lot of us, when we think of a final, we think, it's going to be the culmination, the highest quality, the highest stakes. But a lot of finals are not that great. I mean, you watch especially a lot of championship playoff finals because the stakes and the intensity is so high. We've seen it with Chelsea. Chelsea, because we're emotionally invested, and those fans last night were emotionally invested in their clubs. If you're a Spurs fan, you don't think it's a crap final, probably. And Chelsea have been involved in some finals that I'm sure for the neutral were not that entertaining. A lot of finals are not that enjoyable, but I think obviously the irony of two clubs who've had such a dire season, and the fact that if you're United you cannot beat this Spurs side is just pathetic. So does that actually, in some ways, in a bittersweet way, in kind of a weird way, ironic way, as we're going to get into, actually help them in Chelsea's transfer targets, who we know have been similar to Man United now that Man United don't have the allure of Champions League football? So we're going to get into that today because I want to speak about Liam Delap and some of the stuff I've heard about him, of why Chelsea shouldn't go near him, and I just kind of personally disagree. Another name, Hugo Ekitike, more meat on the bone in terms of being linked to Chelsea. Another Premier League name that I want to speak about in terms of a striker option. And then I want to speak about Enzo Fernandez, because there's been talk this week about Fernandez. Will he stay at Chelsea? The Real Madrid interest, Real Madrid going after this kind of unknown Galactico that they want to add post the Club World Cup. And could that actually be Enzo Fernandez? Could that actually be another Fernandez? We'll talk about that. So please like, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, share this video around with friends so you get more people involved in the community. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, thank you for tuning in. If you do enjoy what you hear, it would mean the world and be great for the Son of Chelsea community if you can give us a positive rate and review where you're listening to this, so it gets more people listening to the show as well. So thank you for all of that. Thank you for your recent support on the shows as well. But let's jump into it. So RMC Sport reporting that Chelsea are extremely interested in Eintracht Frankfurt striker Hugo Ekitike, who is available for a fee in euros of around 80 to 100 million. Ekitike, we did a comparison between him and Benjamin Sesko recently, and actually Ekitike, given he's not, maybe doesn't have the same name recognition as Benjamin Sesko, who of course has been linked to Chelsea and Arsenal and other big clubs as well. I know a lot of people are looking at him and thinking maybe he could be the striker name that Chelsea eventually go for this summer. I think in terms of that distinguishing between what Chelsea are going to do this summer, if you go based on Chelsea's track record with these sporting directors, Ekitike, Sesko, Delap, other names as well, under the age of like 24, even under the age of 23, they're kind of more realistic. It would be very much breaking the mold of Chelsea to go for someone above that. But I know many people, even like myself, who kind of think you kind of need to do that this summer. But Ekitike is one to look out for. I think his Bundesliga record is pretty impressive this year. But that fee, I keep on saying this, for a fee of that, it's not finding a hidden gem. If you're paying that amount for a striker like Ekitike, it will be like a Rasmus Højlund situation. And I'm not saying that Ekitike is going to be as bad as Højlund, but the pressure on a young striker will be severe. Compared to Liam Delap. Now, Liam Delap, we've talked about consistently. I think I even predicted that I could see Liam Delap signing for Chelsea in 2025. Now, that has maybe changed in recent weeks because there's been heavy reporting that Delap, the player himself, favours a move to Manchester United. Now, does that change because of Man United's failure to win the Europa League and get Champions League football? We will have to see how that plays out. I suspect that Man United will get the deal for Matheus Cunha over the line. That seems like pretty much a sure bet now. Will they go in for a second striker in Liam Delap? Because it is still 30 million. It's not, going out there and spending another 100 million on someone else. It's not. Man United are unlikely now to be in the top bracket of strikers, you suspect, because of their financial issues. However, does that completely rule out Liam Delap? I'm not entirely sure. But Chelsea are one of these teams that have been in the race for Delap for a long period of time. Kieran Gill and others reporting that, Delap suits, very much Chelsea's model. Chelsea are going to propose their project to Delap once again, going to have further talks. I've heard some people, and it's not that these are just like random people. These people, like some of the people I respect, like Rob Prattley, sort of said with information about this, like Delap favours United. We shouldn't go anywhere near him ever again, and he favours United, so just let him go to United. We don't want him anywhere near Chelsea. In some ways, I understand the mentality, but I have to say I just kind of disagree with it because I just don't think it's appreciated. It's a very tribal way to look at the transfer window, in my opinion. It also kind of dismisses examples in history where Chelsea have got players that have become beloved that were literally at a rival's training ground about to sign on the dotted line. The most obvious example of this is Willian. As the song goes, Spurs paid for his flight to come over, have a medical, and then that all changed with one phone call, and Willian decided to make the right call to move over to the wonderment of West London and become a Chelsea player. Pedro was on his way to Manchester United, but then he moved to Stamford Bridge. There have been other examples in history where either a phone call, one club is able to get, Moises Caicedo, a player that is now heralded at Chelsea, was literally on the way to Liverpool. He literally, that could have been him becoming a Liverpool player, as maybe Romeo Lavia could have been a Liverpool player. There are so many examples. I just don't think it's a realistic look at the transfer window. And if you're going to get angry anytime a player considers moving elsewhere, then you might as well just not sign anyone, because not everyone is going to be very few players, very, very few players are going to have the love and devotion, undying love and devotion for Chelsea Football Club from day one. It's just not going to happen, right? You have to be realistic about that. And that should not be a reason you don't sign someone. If Delap is, and I think maybe the Rafinha situation has kind of scarred people a lot, right? If you remember a few summers ago, Chelsea effectively looked like they had a deal done for Rafinha, but it was the player himself who was so motivated to move to Barcelona, and basically it was Barcelona or nowhere else he was going to be going that summer. Unless this is like that for Liam Delap, which I'm not entirely sure it is, it hasn't kind of been suggested it's that anyway, then Chelsea should still be in there. They should still be looking for Liam Delap. I still think Delap for £30 million is not a bad deal as a starting point. I don't think it should be the end of Chelsea's transfer business in the striker department this summer. However, I think based on his output, we've spoken about this consistently, and I just don't think the fact that he's considered another club is a reason we don't go towards him at all. And again, we're going to have targets this summer who are going to do similar. What are we ruling all of those names out? The one obvious one else of his counter is, of course, Victor Osimhen. Mikel, I mean, he's kind of like de facto Osimhen agent at this point. Every day is kind of out there saying Osimhen wants Chelsea, he loves Chelsea, he wants to move to Chelsea. That may end up being what happens this summer. I think there's a long way to go in that happening, to be honest, because I think on the Chelsea side, they have got to adjust how they do business right. And I think Champions League is obviously imperative within that. I think if we don't get Champions League, I don't think Victor Osimhen becomes a Chelsea player. I may be wrong on that, but I can't see it happening. But, for me, Delap, I'm looking at him as a player that, sure, is not maybe the superstar name that we need. But I don't think the reason I don't want to sign Delap is because he considered another club and maybe that's his preference, but that doesn't mean it's like he hasn't signed for Man United yet. So and it's been reported again that he is going to wait before the end of the season, because he's probably also, either because his agent's telling him this or maybe just in himself, he's thinking, well, I want to wait to see what everyone's placed at the end of the year and what proposals I get, because Man United now don't have Champions League football. Chelsea by this time next week may have Champions League football, and they may be able to secure Delap, give him what he wants before joining for the Club World Cup, where he goes out and plays a competition that Man United are not in, right? So that is something as well, I think, to factor in here and why it's not over. The only other name I wanted to throw in, we haven't spoken about him yet, is Joao Pedro. It's being reported, I think Fabrizio Romano reported that Joao Pedro is maybe likely to leave Brighton this summer. I mean, he has 10 Premier League goals this season. He's only 23 years old, so he still is quite young. And it's a bit like the Sesko case, where it feels like Pedro has been around for a long period of time. I know he joined Watford at quite a young age, played a little bit in the Premier League, played in the Championship with them, and then moved to Brighton. And the build of Pedro and kind of the way Joao Pedro has looked as a striker has actually changed a lot. He was quite small, he's quite slim. You sort of saw him more as kind of a fluid striker, someone who could maybe play from out wide. But especially over the past year or so, he's become much more of a focal point number 9, bulked up, obviously grown in stature. And I actually quite like him. I think he is, if you look at his numbers compared to Jackson, again, if you're looking for kind of an aerial, dominant, more physically imposing number 9, I think Joao Pedro is certainly that. However, of course, it is another Brighton player, and I think people are kind of so sick of hearing Chelsea going in for Brighton players that there's always going to be that skepticism. But I do think Joao Pedro, based on what he's done already and based on his attributes, I could see going to a higher level and becoming a better player. So there is going to kind of be, and again, it goes back to what Chelsea are either aiming for themselves to do this summer, or Chelsea, based on their Champions League, is kind of what they're looking to do in the market. Are they looking to sign a player who has some good credentials in the Premier League or in Europe and could go on to another level to now become the first choice, or you go out and sign what is kind of obviously the first choice? I think instinctively most of you watching and listening will say, I want the first choice one right now, because we've seen so much of the young player that still needs time to develop and we're kind of sick and tired of it. However, just another name to mention and throw in there as a potential target this summer that I don't think is awful. Like, it's about that nuance, right? I think Delap could be a good addition to Chelsea. I think Joao Pedro has some good attributes that Chelsea don't currently have in terms of just another option in centre forward. But in terms of the big names that people want, obviously that is something that we're going to have to see unravel over the course of the season. The rest of today's show, I want to talk about Enzo Fernandez. So Jacob Steinberg reported, among others, that Chelsea are determined to keep Fernandez despite Real Madrid interest. Chelsea have no intention of selling Fernandez and are determined to see off any attempt to sign him. Xabi Alonso, who of course has taken over now from Carlo Ancelotti, is looking to add more control to his midfield, and Fernandez is one of the names on the club's shortlist. Enzo Fernandez and the links to Real Madrid have been persistent. They have been almost persistent from the moment Chelsea signed Enzo Fernandez. And I think it is going to be a little bit like the Eden Hazard situation. In the sense that I think they just will never go away. That does not mean that Enzo Fernandez could not have a fruitful and quite decent length Chelsea career before doing that. That was the case with Eden Hazard. Hazard, literally, we got the best years of his career, and that's what you want. Like, if he wants to go to Real Madrid at one point, fair enough, but we'll do it after you've had your best years at Stamford Bridge, and then you can move on to your Real Madrid dream. The worst thing is, losing Enzo Fernandez at a point where he hasn't had his best years at Chelsea yet, and he goes on and flourishes at Real Madrid. That is the difference in kind of where you are in the food chain, as I consistently talk about, where you want your best players having at least enough good years at your club where you're winning titles with them. They're big superstars in your team. They're ending their careers at Chelsea with massive legacies. So even if you do end up losing them to the biggest club in the world, you don't feel like you're losing something massive. You've gained enough out of that player, and I think that's the hope with Enzo Fernandez. I don't think Enzo Fernandez will leave Chelsea this summer. I just personally feel like it's one of those things where I would like to think he's had he joined in midway through the 22-23 season. This is his second full season with the club. So next season would be kind of arguably his third full season with the club. And it kind of feels like Fernandez is starting to click into place as a Chelsea player. I don't feel like I've seen Fernandez at his best for long enough for Chelsea, where it feels like a very incomplete story. Now, there is obviously a concern that if Chelsea miss out on Champions League qualification, some of their players may start getting itchy feet. Like, they may start thinking to themselves, how many more years am I going to sit around waiting for Chelsea to get Champions League football when I've got potential suitors like Real Madrid, for instance, the biggest club in the world, at least in my opinion, who could give me that instantly and make me a big part of their plans. Now, Fernandez has come out quite recently in an interview and say how much he loves Chelsea, and he's been given the captain's armband. Is that kind of a strategy internally to try and keep him at the club for a longer period of time? I don't know, but I think Fernandez has definitely improved this year. He's not been the best player, but given my concerns about him and his output earlier in the season, I think he has done a massive U-turn, and I'm really happy to be proven wrong about my concerns with Fernandez, because I think at his best he has proven to be also a scorer of big goals, and let's hope he can do that in the final 2 games of the season. And I think he's taking more of kind of an inspirational leader role, and I think fans are kind of responding to that, and kind of him growing in influence in what is quite a young dressing room. But it feels like as a character, he's kind of more of maybe a mature figure within that dressing room. And we've seen how much it has hurt him when Chelsea haven't lived up to expectation this year. And I think that is also connected with fans, right? Like, it feels like he is someone that deeply cares about what's happening at Chelsea. So that's why I hope as a character, as a figure, he doesn't see the need to jump right now, because I think for a player of his potential, and what he's already done in the game, what I think he will do in the game, I think Real Madrid will be there. Again, it's the importance of Champions League football. If Chelsea have that and they can add big players around Enzo Fernandez, and it's the same with Cole Palmer, I think it's the same with Caicedo, it's the same with a lot of your big players, right? If you can justify and show them that, yeah, sure, you may have this dream of playing for that club one day, but right here, we're gonna have a competitive team. We're gonna have an elite team, and you can be not just one of a number of Galacticos. You can be a star. Then I think Enzo Fernandez hopefully will remain at Chelsea. So I know there are some doubts about Rodrigo. Right, we spoke about Rodrigo the other day, and talks for him and him leaving Real Madrid. And what about a swap deal? I say this every summer. I am so skeptical of swap deals. They just so rarely happen. They just the swap deals that people talk about are, either a situation of convenience, basically, where like last summer we had the scenario with Conor Gallagher that the club clearly wanted to sell and wanted to get rid of, and then you have Joao Felix that Atletico Madrid, were desperate to get rid of. I don't think a scenario where Chelsea want to let Enzo Fernandez go, willingly, is going to lead to a swap deal where Rodrigo will come the other way. Again, swap deals they're rare and they're unique, and the club, I think, maybe especially Bowley in the early days of this ownership, wanted to try and make them happen. I don't really see them. I think Chelsea would rather be heavily compensated for losing Enzo Fernandez, and given how much they paid for him, it's going to take a big fee to get him out of Chelsea, especially at the current moment. So those are my thoughts on that. Please like, subscribe. Tomorrow's Friday, so probably either tomorrow or Saturday we'll be giving you my team selector and preview ahead of the game. The huge game. One thing that's definitely coming out tomorrow is my Substack piece on the game, so stay tuned for that. Please like, subscribe, follow me across the socials. That's SonOfChelsea, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.